Philip, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, in the last few years, you've had your own company startup, Klink Finance. What do you think has been your greatest learning in the last couple of years?
So before diving into Klink, I was always involved in the startup ecosystem. So I had a lot of different stages in my career where I learned from other entrepreneurs, where I built side hustles next to my regular job, and then running my own company over the last 2.5 years was such an intense step up from a learning curve. So you are never prepared just by looking what other people do to when you're running your own company. And that comes not just with the focus on the product itself, because many people think if I have a good idea, it will just fly. So I just need to build a first version, people will love it, I will scale it, and it doesn't stop there. So that's one big misunderstanding that many people have about building a company, because you need to be so agile when you run a business. You need to always prepare for situations that can go wrong. You need your product to be always fitting the market needs. So you have to continuously innovate from the initial idea. And most of the time, also, the first idea that you have when you start your company will end up being something completely different when you in the end find your product market fit and really scale your business. Plus, one thing that is also an important learning as an entrepreneur, you very rarely focus on the things that go well. So you're always just firefighting, you're always just tackling problems. So your job is basically just dealing with things that don't work. So that's the biggest learning. There's no such thing as, okay, we'll build this first version, everything will go right, and then I will just live a chill life. So that doesn't exist in entrepreneurship most of the time.
It's all about that resilience to deal with those obstacles. So, what helps you personally when you have once more a failure or result that didn't work out or challenge that was unexpected? What helps you in those moments to stand back up and continue?
There's a few different strategies that you can apply. So one, starting with your own psychology. So you have to learn to detach an emotional relationship to your business, because it's important that you see it as a business only, and that also things that happen to you when you're in your business, even with employees or with partners or with markets changing, you always need to see it as something that doesn't affect you as a person and is not against you personally. So that's one very important point, because a lot of people, they treat their startups as their babies. They only care for that. They want the best success for it, and they treat everything that is against their startup as a personal offense. So then it makes it much harder to recover from certain situations. But if you treat it just as a circumstance that occurred and now you need to find a solution for it, then you get much faster in recovering from those kind of situations. And also, just outside of your work environment, you also need to try to maintain a healthy lifestyle as well, because that is one very important aspect. So going to the gym or finding some sort of sports that you like, some sort of hobbies where you can detach from your work as well, that always helps a lot. And for me, the only way to do this is always in the morning. So I try to keep my mornings off work. So go to the gym or do sports and do things that are not related to my work, because always things stack up during the day. The to-do list always gets longer and you find so many excuses not to do those kind of things in the evening. So for me, the best way to manage this type of work-life relationship, for me personally, not talking about my friends and family, but this is the only way how it works. And one thing that helped me also tremendously over the last years building this company is you're most of the time never the first person to have such a problem that you're facing at this specific moment in building your business. So there have been thousands of other people going through exactly the same problems. So it's very important to maintain and build a close relationship of mentors and advisors, other startup founders that you can use as a sparrings partner to find solutions for the given problem that you have in such a situation. to be much faster in recovering from those kind of problems as well.
What I'm hearing from what you're saying is first the ability to not be so emotionally engaged and attached in our business that we take things too much at heart. Then it's having a really healthy lifestyle and also this ability to switch off in the mornings, maybe for others in the evenings or the weekends, and having this peer group and mentors that can help you when you get stuck with a problem. But not only in this case is it the mentorship and the peer group, but it's also being solution focused versus problem focused. What I've noticed when I've worked with entrepreneurs and founders is some of them have a tendency to focus over and over again on here's where I'm stuck, here's not working, here's why I'm not moving forward, here's what I don't want in my life and my business. And they repeat this in circles in their mind. And the ones that I know either personally as friends or that I have coached who are most successful are the ones who are like, okay, this is a problem. What am I going to do about it? What is a potential solution? Who can I talk to? Who would be a great mentor? What's a course I can do? What's a book I can read on this to help me move through to the next stage? So this ability to be solution focused. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, continuous learning is definitely one important aspect, but also you find many entrepreneurs also getting stuck in micromanaging certain tasks and focusing on problems that if you zoom out a bit and take a step back and look at that problem and look at where you want to go with the company, so focusing on macro goals for the business, sometimes these problems will go away themselves without even having to focus on it. So if you always try to just tackle only the smaller issues and lose your bigger vision, then you do a lot of things that become irrelevant in the end. So I fully agree with you. That's always one important task. You can get lost quite quickly in smaller issues. And then the most important thing for a startup is the agility and also being fast in changing to new requirements, changing to problems, changing to the markets or your customer needs. But then prioritization becomes the number one point, always, for not just for yourself, but also for all your employees and managing them. Because sometimes it can feel that you need to now focus on this small problem, whilst if you would zoom out and look at where you want to shift the business or what's the next phase of the company, then this problem would be solved anyway. So that helps a lot. So I agree with the point that you made.
It's pretty much this idea of looking first at the big stones and then the small pebbles, looking first at the important work and then having that ability to focus mostly on that and not so much on the urgent things. But you mentioned right now prioritization, and I think this is huge. What are some tools or mindsets or questions that you ask yourself to determine, is this really a needle mover? Will this really make a difference or impact in my business? Or is it just something I feel I should do, or it's just busy work?
Yeah, so there is a lot of different frameworks that can be used, and there's a lot of different strategies. There's also ways to set key goals for yourself, for a quarter, for a month, for your team. But then there is also one struggle that many people face. They try to apply frameworks that are made for larger companies to a very small and agile team, and that absolutely doesn't work. So you can't just set goals for the next half a year or the next quarter even and purely focus on it and then neglect how things are changing, that the product is changing, that maybe now you need something else than what you thought you would need 2 months back. So for me, what works best is still trying to set those goals, but be very flexible with it. So it's important to revisit them a lot of the times. So what we do and what helped us a lot is we started from the very early phase when we were only a handful of people. Now we are 17, so we are growing a bit inside the company. But every month we bring together everyone for a monthly. And what we do there is we let everyone present what has happened in that month. What are the key goals for the whole team? What do we want to achieve at the end of the month? What has happened and how is the market doing? What is customer feedback? So we basically collect a lot of different data points that address different problems inside our business. And then every month I revisit the slides of the last months. I go through what has happened, what were our goals, And then based on that, we can determine this has changed. This is what we learned. This is what we tackled. And we speak it through. So we discuss, okay, why did we reach this goal faster than expected? Or why didn't we even tackle this problem, even though we said last month to that is the most important thing. So for me, this monthly cycle of going through all the different departments, going through all the different people and setting our goals works extremely well. So there is no limitation to it. You can start, if you're just two people co-founding a company, you can do it together. This might sound ridiculous for many because you feel like we are speaking anyway all the time. So there's no other employees, but it helps set a lot of structure, and also what it gives, and what for me personally is very important, it also gives gratitude after 6 or 9 months when you look back and see where you started and what types of problems you have faced and how far you've come. Because this is something that many startups also forget. They feel like they are not moving ahead, they're not making progress. And then you can always revisit and see where you came from and why things have changed. So for us, this monthly cycle works extremely well. Now moving into a next phase where we want to scale up the business a bit more. At some point, it will not be possible to get everyone in the same room. It will not be possible to do it every month. But the clearer you get on the goals for your business and the better you get in setting quarterly goals, then you can also have these meetings less frequently. And you can also start having it in different groups. So having it, for example, only with the management, then the management will distribute the key learnings out of those meetings to their teams. So you basically spread information from top to bottom inside the company. But at this point where we are standing, it works extremely well to have it monthly and not focus too strongly on any frameworks for larger entities.
Yes, there is a big difference between when you're a bigger organization and you can have your OKRs and KPIs on a bigger scale versus when you're smaller and you need to be more agile and flexible. I love this idea of these monthly reviews. And when you put together these goals, when you think about the direction you want to go in, what helps you to determine to choose one direction or one goal compared to another? You might have 10 different ideas or 10 different ways that you could scale and grow the business. How do you choose that one direction to move forward?
Yeah, so also that changed a lot over the last 2 years. So initially, you always focus on that big vision. And once you have a product in the market, things change drastically, because then the most important thing is to always fix problems that your users have, because you can tend to forget that you have this big vision, you want to go somewhere. That is great to have, it's important to have, but at the same time, right now, clients or users are dealing with a product that has a problem or doesn't work. So prioritization of the existing experience for your clients and users is always the most important, to fix that first. And then the next thing is to look out for what brings you towards your bigger vision and how is that determined. Because initially it is determined only by the founder vision. They set the guidelines, they set the rules, and the further you go with your product, the more different data points you get. So you get customer feedback, you have employees that deal with that product all the time. They also have ideas and inputs. And then you need to start evaluating those different inputs, prioritization between how much of an impact will this change have inside the product, and how much work do we have to put into it, and how many resources do we have to allocate to fix this specified problem or to build this new feature for the product. So you always have to balance it out between those different things, whilst fixing existing problems for customers always comes first. Because if you lose them, it's so hard to get them back. And that should be always the main goal, to make your existing users happy and retain them. Because only if you create a flywheel of getting users in, making them happy, maybe even having them invite other people, these are all data points that are so important to figure out this magical state of product market fit. So only if you can find this sweet spot, then you can continue scaling a successful company.
What were some of the 2, 3 core mistakes that you made since you started that if someone is listening here and they have their own business, they could learn from?
One of the biggest mistakes that we did initially is we hired too early. So we raised our first pre-seed round fairly early in the business. And from then, we thought, okay, now we're in a stage of just growing the business. And we brought in a lot of people in a phase where we didn't even have a live product. So we even had a marketing team already, but there wasn't anything to market for. So that was one of the initial mistakes that we did. So now I would always suggest to focus on the MVP first, the initial customer traction. That can all be done just by the founders. So once you establish this type of initial good traction and have a product that is ready to go into the market, then you can start adding people to it. And it always makes sense to also find a way to generate revenue and then scale the team based on the revenue that you're generating as a business. So hiring too early is something that I now frequently see with teams that we didn't overhire too much, but there are also teams out there that don't have a product in the market that are already 50, 60 people inside the companies. And that is one key mistake that I see. Second of all is also being too focused on the founder vision for too long. So having this idea why you started the company is always good to have, but when you hire your initial team members, you want people who share that vision, but who also have an impact on that vision. So being open to external feedback is something that is very important, whilst always learning to balance it out, because in the end, the founders know most about running that company in that specific niche. There's no one else of external mentors or advisors who understand exactly how you're operating and why you're operating in that field. So balancing out all those different opinions is something that is very important, because there is a tremendous amount of opinions on your business and no one is shy of giving advice or direction. So it's that is always a balancing act, especially for first-time founders or people who are new in building a company. It always feels like you have to listen to those kind of successful entrepreneurs who have built something previously, but things change so quickly. So what has worked for them doesn't necessarily mean that it also works for you. So that is one second very important point that I've learned over the last 2 years, basically.
And you also mentor and coach different businesses, different startups to help them to develop and grow. When you look at the different startups that you're mentoring, what do you think makes a difference between the ones who get quicker and more rapid success? And especially less about their strategy, what do you think their psychology or their mindset, what is it in that psychology and mindset that helps them to get faster to high level of success?
That's also a very good question. So for me, there is one important thing that I see that makes a big difference between founders is passion about the field that they're operating in and for the product that they're building. Because you see entrepreneurs that are building a business plan or building their initial pitch deck or talking about their idea just because they've seen someone on Instagram build something in that way, or someone, a friend of a friend who has made a lot of money with that. So not being fully aligned with why you are building the company. So if there is passion for the problem that you're facing, or you've faced that problem, or you want that product and you can't find it anywhere. So if you have this intrinsic motivation, that is so needed to go through the roller coaster ride of building a startup, because there is a lot of downs as well in building a startup. There's always great ups that where you can celebrate your successes and where you can have great fun with your team and all your partners that you have. But it is important to go through also darker times and more tough periods of building a company. If you lack that intrinsic motivation, if you don't really care for what type of product you are building, then it is very difficult to go through those phases. So that for me makes already a key difference. Now, a second point that is very much related to it is if you have too much passion for exactly what you're building, and then don't understand that also you need to build a business around it. So I see a lot of startups, especially that come from directly from university. They have very fundamental goals to make the world better in a specific field, or that they want this specific product to work exactly in the way that they want. So they are far too much emotionally involved with the product and neglect that an idea and a product is not enough. You also have to build a business around it. And in the end, someone has to pay for it. So that is something that many young teams forget. They don't have an underlying sustainable revenue stream that shows how you can become successful and build a sustainable company that can finance itself. So for me, this is one of the most important things that I always try to understand first is the why. So why is the founder building this company? What is the vision? Why do they want to tackle this problem, and how do they get there over the long term as well? So I try to find a good understanding of that before I start working on the actual idea and product with them.
So what I'm getting from what you're saying is both clear why, clear vision, and also business mindset strategy. And it's either too little passion, maybe only driven by this extrinsic motivation of money or being a startup and it's cool, or the too overload in some ways of passion, but the lack of business mindset. And I also see that a lot with entrepreneurs, the ones who love what they do, they love their field, but they hate marketing and sales. That doesn't work. It's not a very good combination.
I agree. And you can balance a lot of that out by building a well-matched co-founding team. So if you have someone who is very experienced in the technology behind it, or is very passionate about solving the problem, but doesn't have, as you said, the understanding of how to build good marketing around it, how to do sales, you can always build a co-founding team. But then you open a new set of problems, right? One of the key reasons why many startups fail is founder conflicts. So this is one important thing that you also have to look at when evaluating the success of a startup, when evaluating the match inside a co-founding team. So there is no exact right or wrong. So I've seen all different sorts of combinations. I've seen best friends building together. I've seen people building together that haven't known each other before. So my co-founder and I, we haven't been friends before we started the company, and it's working extremely well. But there is always, things can always go right and things can always go wrong. So it's important to evaluate that specific situation and understand what works for the company. One thing that you rarely see is very large co-founding teams. So most of the times, what works well is 2 or 3 people inside the co-founding team. So solo entrepreneurs is very tough. If it's a serial entrepreneur, if that person has built other companies before, then definitely it can work well because they understand how it goes. But if you're trying to tackle everything on your own, that again becomes a danger to the business by running into a burnout personally, because you have to deal with everything and you don't feel like there is some sort of sparring partner that can help you get through those phases. At the same time, if you have 5 people in a co-founding team or 6 people in a co-founding team, everyone has a strong opinion that they feel like it's the right direction for the business. So it becomes much harder and much slower to find compromises between those directions and visions and make everyone happy at the same time.
It's about having that balance once more. Maybe not solopreneurs, depends what business you're running, but in general, especially startup world, and not 5 founders. Okay, we're approaching the last minutes of today's episode. What would you like to leave the listener with? Let's say someone is on the verge of starting their own startup journey. What would you give them as a recommendation and advice to help them to kickstart and go through the harder times as a business founder?
Yeah, what has worked for me is I've learned a lot from other people before I started my company. So I worked in the startup ecosystem. I started as an early employee in a startup. I worked in a in a venture builder, in venture capital. I also started sort of side hustles next to my regular job. So tapping into the field of e-commerce at that time, because that is one very easy access and one thing that is always discussed quite a lot. So many people who talk about entrepreneurship, being self-employed, they always look at the field of e-commerce. So that is something where I didn't get far with the project, but whilst doing it, you learn what it takes to build your own project. You need to look into finding a good product that you can sell, setting up initial marketing, what it takes to build a brand around it. So you learn all the small details of running a business whilst not putting too much financial burden on yourself. So you can always start something on the side next to your day job to minimize risk, because risk is in the end what keeps a lot of people tapping into the field of entrepreneurship. So this for me worked extremely well. I took it until a point where I had a job, I had a side hustle, and I also was advising other companies. So I basically juggled far too many things at that point. And then I came into a situation where I felt like none of my projects are really moving forward because I just don't have enough time for it. So at that point, I understood, okay, now I feel ready to really fully dive into just one product. I've learned a lot. I'm ready to do it now. So I basically quit all the things that I did and then dove straight into understanding which part of an industry I want to build in, and this is how I then started Klink.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Philip. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights on your founder journey, entrepreneurship journey. There's so much to learn here around that right balance of passion, around having that inner resilience and not getting too emotionally involved. So many great insights. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.